Okay, good evening, folks. Welcome. So excited to see so many people here on a snowy night. It's marvelous. We got a full house. Beautiful. Tonight's program for the League of Women Voters, Learn with the League, is entitled Immigrants and Refugees, How to Make Ames Welcoming. I'm John Klaus. I'm the chair of the League of Women Voters Program Committee. It's an ad hoc committee. We do a program every month. And this month's program for the month of December will be presented by Dr. Diane Burt, an ISU Distinguished Professor of Nutrition and Food Science, and also a member of the American Academy of Medicine. She is also chair of the Ames Interfaith Refugee Alliance and a member of the Ames Sanctuary Interfaith Partners. So, nothing more needs to be said. She will tell us all about refugees in Ames and what we can do to make them welcome. Dr. Burt.
Oh, Kathy, you have some comments. Oh, okay. John, we need the microphone.
So, as they said, welcome to Ames Public Library for this program presented in partnership with the library and the Ames and Story County, the League of Women Voters of Ames and Story County. I'm Kathy Cooney. I'm an adult services librarian. Just a couple housekeeping things. This room is equipped with an induction loop for the benefit of hearing aid users, so you just need to switch it to T. Or if you'd prefer a headset for assisted listening, I have it in the back. Just come see me. And I wanted to remind you the library's mission is to connect you to the world of ideas through diverse and inclusive resources and programming. And with that, I will hand it over to Diane.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Kathy. I'm really proud to be here tonight representing these two organizations in Ames. The Ames Interfaith Refugee Alliance has been here for 7 years, and the Ames Sanctuary Interfaith Partners for 3 years, we think. Everybody that I've talked to so far thinks we remember that correctly. And both organizations are seeking to make immigrants and refugees welcome in Ames. And tonight's presentation is going to focus on telling you a little bit about what's the difference between the immigrants and refugees, maybe why we have two organizations, and stories of those that are here in Ames. So first, I'll give you some global statistics. We've really hit a benchmark this year, so that will be an important point to know. We have a phenomenal number of displaced people in the world now. And then we'll talk about immigrants, very common category in the United States. We have a lot of us have immigrated here, or our ancestors have immigrated here. And then the Ames Sanctuary Interfaith Partner, since their focus is in the categories of immigrants, talk about their purposes. Then stories. And one story from well, actually two stories from Ames and one from Marshalltown. And then talk a bit about refugees and different ways to define refugees. And the Ames Interfaith Refugee Alliance, our purposes. Refugees in Ames, their stories, and I'm thrilled that we have one of the recent arrivals in Ames that will tell his story. And then how you can get involved. Very important, because we need more people involved. So statistics. What I mentioned, a real striking statistic is that first one at the top. 100 million individuals are now displaced. It's more than that now. These numbers actually are effective as of, well, that's a tiny little button there, isn't it? Well, as of a year ago, so I'm sure it's much higher than that now. And of those, depending upon how you break them down, 27 million refugees, 23 million internally displaced people. These are people who have not left their country. And asylum seekers, about 5 million, And at the time of this, it was 4.4 million Venezuelans. I think that number is up above 6 million now. So, and again, new numbers will be coming out on this soon. So immigrants. In general, we think of immigrants as people who leave one country to go live in another country. They generally have vetting through the embassy or consulate, and there are a lot of different categories for entry. We'll talk about that in a minute. Many have family connections. I bet many of you have immigrant family connections. We have a son-in-law who's Belgian. He has a green card, so he's a legal immigrant, but we expect him to be here for a while, I hope. They can return to their own country, and immigrants receive no government financial assistance, at least initially. 4 general categories: immigrants who have obtained U.S. citizenship, lawful permanent residents, temporary visitors, tourists, and then what we hear about in the news a lot with a lot of controversy are the undocumented immigrants. Oops, I keep forgetting I have it right in my hand. So 1 in 7 U.S. residents is an immigrant, and 1 in 8 is native-born U.S. citizen with at least one of their parents being an immigrant. How many of you fit into one of these categories? I'm surprised. We're not matching the numbers here. Almost half of all immigrants in the U.S. are naturalized citizens. And actually, one of the refugees you'll be hearing the story of tonight is a U.S. citizen. And this shows a table breaking that down. Essentially, naturalized citizens at the time this was done were about 45%, lawful permanent residents about 27%, temporary lawful residents 5%, and then unauthorized immigrants about 23%, or 10.5 million. That number of unauthorized immigrants has really stayed very constant over the last decade. 2007 was when it was a peak, came down since then, and it has remained fairly constant. So the idea that we're being, suddenly getting all of these unauthorized people is misleading, unfortunately. As we look at undocumented immigrants, here's where there are often more people who need the help of organizations like ours. Most came to the U.S. legally. And I checked recently on this, because this is what I'd heard for a long time, and this is still true. This has not changed. Most came here legally, and they chose to overstay their legal status, or, I'll tell you, there's a heck of a lot of paperwork involved in keeping their legal status. They may have just, oh, wait a minute, I should have renewed, now it's too late, now I'm undocumented. And once you're undocumented, then it's really tough to get back in the system. They may have come as tourists, on a temporary work visa, or as children who came with their parents. Many are now coming across the border seeking asylum and risking detention. And that's, you hear about the problems at the border. Yes, there are some that sneak across and somehow get by the Border Patrol, but not too many. That's a trickle. And I'm talking to an immigration lawyer here in town, Joanne Bartine. She says she used to see quite a few of those people, but she doesn't see them anymore. There are very few now. Generally, the people that you're seeing crowding at our southern border are presenting themselves to Immigration and Naturalization Service. They want to come in legally. Big problem is there are far more of them than there are of the U.S. immigration naturalization people to take care of all of the paperwork. A phenomenal backlog. Deferred action for childhood arrivals. This really applies to those who came in as children and had no say. We'll hear a DACA story in a little bit here. And at the time, 2021, when DACA or 2012, when DACA was formed, there were more than 1.3 million people that were eligible for DACA. They had been brought in as children And then they got to be teenagers and found out, I'm undocumented. I can't go to college. I can't work. What's my future? So DACA was a lifesaver. It still is. At this point in time, for those people who have DACA, they can renew. They're not adding new people, and we're hopeful that we'll have legislation to make DACA, these are the dreamers, to make DACA a long-term program, and hopefully a pathway to citizenship. Okay, I think. So, detention at our southern border. Yes, we have an unprecedented number arriving at the southern border. If they arrive at a legal checkpoint, that's when they're presenting themselves to ICE. If they're between legal checkpoints, then they might be trying to sneak in under the wire. Most who present themselves are turned away. They're sent back to their home country. This is not legal. This is in violation of their rights. They have a right to present themselves for asylum. When people present themselves and don't have paperwork ahead, they're seeking asylum. When we talk about refugees, that will be different. They take care of the paperwork before they get here, as the refugee we have here can attest to. Those who do get to enter, if they don't have sponsors and housing, this is one reason we are going to be letting people know we need sponsors, we need housing. A lot of what our organizations do, the Refugee Alliance and the Sanctuary Partners, is raise money so that the cost of sponsoring, we help you cut down tremendously that cost of sponsoring or hosting. Let's see. So, if they do enter and they don't have sponsors and housing, then they are sent to these detention centers, or literally prisons, that are down on the southern border that we've all heard about and seen pretty deplorable conditions. I think it's an embarrassment. Under the COVID era, Title 42, they were not even allowed into the U.S., so they're left in tent city conditions in Mexico. Of those who do get into the U.S., they wait years to have their first court case. And we'll have an example of that coming up in one of the stories. And they receive no government support, and employment permits. Takes them a long time to get a permission to work. So you can imagine it's very hard for them to stay under these conditions. So the Ames Sanctuary Interfaith Partner, or ASIP, volunteer organization that advocate on behalf of particularly undocumented and asylum-seeking immigrants. As you can tell by the title, they formed for sanctuary. Initially, the idea was physical sanctuary, providing safety through sanctuary in churches. There's actually a Homeland Security procedure for doing this. And this was back when ICE was going and picking up undocumented people and deporting them. I think maybe some of the pressure has relieved from that. In Ames, we have not had any physical sanctuary. Any churches agree to do physical sanctuary. And I don't know, there may be people who've worked closer than I have with this. I haven't heard that there's been somebody asking for it. So. And then they also do what's called the New Sanctuary Movement. This is to end injustice. This is to end the tent cities, to end the detention, to find better ways to help people who legally want to cross the border and seek asylum here. Too fast. So, projects of the Ames Sanctuary Interfaith Partner. A big project of theirs is they brought a Honduran mother and son in 2021. And they brought them from the southern border for sanctuary. Their asylum case is pending. They have covered the costs of 100 DACA applicants for their reapplication, for their recertification. These are children, or they were brought as children. They're now in Iowa, and they reside in Iowa. The largest number are in Polk County. They have partnered with local congregations to prepare backpacks for asylum people getting admitted for asylum as they are released from detention in San Antonio, Texas, heading off to where they have sponsors or hosts or a community that is helping them. And last, they've identified grandparents in Mexico who want to visit their family in Marshalltown they haven't seen for 10 years, and again, there's a program with Mexico to help this. If the grandparents are over 60 years of age, they haven't seen their family for 10 years, they allow for some family reunification. And that's another project they're working on. So, first story, an asylum story. This is Lycida's story. Lycida was born in Honduras, in Gracias, in western Honduras. This is shown up there on the map. And it's a very, I think, I was told by the Hansons that to get there, there aren't good roads. You have to drive across, beaches and things to get into that area. Very remote part of Honduras. She was working with small farmers there. She served her church as treasurer. And at the time she was there, we've all heard this in the news, Honduras has been overrun by gang violence, a lot of drug gangs, and just, the government is broken down there. Second highest homicide rate in the world. She was a vocal woman, and she spoke out against the government taking a communal forest area. And in response, she was threatened and then attacked by a gang that was connected to the government. She went to court, took one of the gang leaders to court. He was convicted, and unfortunately, he served a very short term from that conviction, and then he threatened to kill her son, and the extended family. And her family agreed, you have to leave. So she and her son left Honduras. They were robbed while traveling in Guatemala, which of course the next country up, and local Catholic sisters sheltered them. And then the Sisters of St. Francis from Omaha, I think the Catholic sisters contacted the Sisters of St. Francis, and they contacted David Hansen because he'd been putting out feelers about how could we help asylum seekers. And there's quite a network of organizations trying to help asylum seekers. And David was to secure housing and sponsors. And if he could do that, they felt she might be able to receive asylum because of her case. So housing was offered. Spanish-speaking sponsor was identified. St. Cecilia, ASAP, and ERA signed on as secondary sponsors. And so she had things arranged so as she approached the border, she could come in. At the border with Guatemala, she was held by the Mexican authorities for 3 months. And this related to this Title 42 health risks. I guess the Center for Disease Control says, we shouldn't be doing this, but the Mexicans are still holding people. And I think the U.S. is not fighting it very much. She was 3 months in an asylum program in Mexico on the southern border, way down here, just inside the southern border from Guatemala. She was held there for 3 months, and maybe there was a good side of that because a paralegal helped prepare her for the border and then helped with travel up to Tijuana. And so Tijuana is where she came into the U.S., met ICE there. Her papers were in good shape. She legally entered the U.S. An agency in the U.S., a Jewish agency, provided transportation, rooms, meals, doctor's exams, COVID testing, the things that she needed to be able to travel on into the U.S. And after all of that happened, she flew to Des Moines and was greeted by ASAP and brought to Ames. And she is still in Ames. And here she is with her son Francisco, who came with her, and a daughter who was born just a little over a year ago. In Ames, they've received legal counseling, and this is a good example of how long it takes to get a court hearing. 6/20/25 is her next court hearing. And, it could be she'll go in for that, and they'll say, oh, no, we need something different, and they'll put her off another few years. In general, people are here for 8 to 10 years before their case is really heard for asylum. Really incredible. She's getting housing, food, medical support, English lessons, conversation partners, schools, and religious connection. And there are several people here that do work directly with Lisida. So if there's questions about her case, I'm sure we have people who can answer them. And then another story, a DACA story. This story is from Anna out of Marshalltown. Wait a minute, I missed the DACA. There, yeah. Had to have her brought here first. At 6 months of age, her mother brought her across the border from Brownsville. I put a star there for those of you way down in the southern tip of Texas. She was born with all of her internal organs kind of in a tangle. And she had what she calls a little hand. I have a picture over here. You'll see what she means by that. And the doctors just told her, Mom, take her home. She's not going to live. Well, her mother was not about that. That was not what her mother was going to settle for. So her mother found that she could get help in Chicago and brought her across the border. Yes, illegally, but what mother wouldn't? And they went to the Shriners Hospital Shriners Hospital, oh golly, sorry about that. Good morning. This is a real easy thing to jump. The Shriners Hospital in Chicago, they were up there for 2 years taking care of her medical problems as a child. Then she moved to Marshalltown, where she still lives. And here she is. She's on the far left here with the yellow glasses in her hand. And a sister and brother were brought. She estimated she was 3 years old in that picture. The Minneapolis Shriners Hospital continued to help her, and the Zagazig Shriners from Des Moines provided transportation, hotels, and meals to get her to Minneapolis. And it was particularly helpful for her to see other children that had been born with something that made them different. So she has fond memories of that. She was bullied as a child. A very strong teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, stopped the bullying, and Anna moved forward after that. As a teenager, she heard about this thing that we do in Iowa of detasseling. How many of you have detasseled? Many of you? Yeah. Strong Iowa tradition, right? And she went to her mom and said, I want to detassel. A summer job for a teenager. And her mom, what she said her mom said, I'm imagining her mom said it in Spanish, but she said she needs to know, what if immigration comes? That was back about the time that we were hearing about immigration coming into some of the plants and just carrying people, putting people on buses and carrying them off. So her mother then told her that she was undocumented. She didn't know it until then. And it kind of threw her into depression. She was pretty down at that point. Then at 17 years of age, and this is her words, her body needed surgery. She had awful pain. Medicine didn't help at home. Morphine didn't help in the hospital. She ended up at Blank's Children's Hospital, and the liver specialist couldn't believe she was still alive. They felt that she was a miracle. 5-hour surgery. They hoped they could put her liver back where it belongs, but they did remove a gallbladder, remove some kind of a mass. She called it a ball. It sounded like it was maybe a benign mass. And her appendix. And they put a shield by her liver because they couldn't get it back where it belonged. And she said she had 3 months till she graduated, and she was able to graduate, but her grades did fall, and she lost the scholarship that she had. In 2012, she said when DACA was signed and it got started, it was the best day of her life. She had a permit, she could get a permit to work, and she could go to school. After DACA status, she did her first job as a preschool, and she was able to save money for college. She hadn't been able to save anything towards college before this time. So at 20, she started college, but she didn't have money saved up, so she did all kinds of temporary jobs, newspaper delivery, customer service, on to be a resident aide at Iowa Veterans Hospital. In the morning, she worked. In the afternoon, she went to school. At night, she worked on a CNA. After quite a while of that, a lot of stress, she passed her clinicals, but did not pass a computer test, and again, became very frustrated and stopped school. DACA recipients must be going to school or working. And here's a recent picture of her, obviously, getting her feet wet. She's been a security guard since about a year ago. She went back to college in August. She's doing well in 2 classes, and at this point in the year, I guess she's almost to the end of the term in those classes. She works in the afternoon and evening. She does what she needs to do to go to college. Something she said that we need to pay attention to is it's really hard for DACA recipients to find scholarships. They have to be specifically for DACA recipients, so that there's a need there. She's interested in broadcasting and digital media, and she wanted to give special thanks to Yoya Laville of Marshalltown Immigrant Allies. They connected her with ASAP, where she got the money, I think $495 or something, for her renewal. So a lot of these things, cost a lot of money too, the paperwork that is required. Another project is the backpacks for asylum seekers. Backpacks were prepared in June of 2022. 100 were sent to San Antonio, Texas, and given to children on and adults on their way to their sponsors. So these is as they're leaving detention, and you see that the people that were doing that were having a lot of fun packing backpacks. Blankets, and I think a letter from Iowa went into the backpacks to welcome them. Okay, refugees. Refugees flee their home due to war, violence, persecution, and the number of different categories of persecution was essentially decided back in the 1960s in a global conference. They often live in resettlement camps. Most would prefer to go home. They would prefer that things at home be such that they can return home. They arrange to enter the U.S. before they arrive. This is in contrast to asylum seekers. Asylum seekers arrive at the border without permission to come in. The refugees have their permission as they arrive, either in an airport or at one of our borders. The legal statutory path for refugees is the UN process under the Department of State. Takes years to be admitted, and the number is declining. I'll show you the graph on the next slide. Now we have what fit the category up here of fleeing their home due to war, violence, or persecution, which those of us who work in the areas of trying to help refugees, we consider these refugees, although they are not going through the Department of State. And these are those coming from Afghanistan, Venezuela, and Ukraine are entering with humanitarian parole. And it's based on an urgent need to relocate. Obviously, you don't get if you have an urgent need to relocate, waiting at least 2 years for vetting by the UN doesn't help much. Plus, we're not admitting many. The blue line shows the annual ceiling, and you see it came down precipitously in the 1980s. Maybe someone remembers exactly why that happened, but probably anti-immigrant. Anytime there's anti-immigrant, refugees and immigrants are lumped together, and they get stopped as well. And then it bounced around a little bit here. Over there at 2020, of course, is the last administration cut the quotas way down for refugees. And then in the orange line, you see the number admitted. The quotas have gone back up under the present administration, under the Biden administration, but the admission has not. Admission is still down just over 20,000. When it used to be up here, you know, up over 200,000. So the settlement of refugees, looking at more of the humanitarian definition, not just the UN in 2020. But it's important to note the differences in the categories. UN-vetted refugees, they have a pathway to citizenship. They come in knowing that if all, you know, they move through the steps, they will get citizenship. They receive services through refugee resettlement agencies. There are several of them in Des Moines. They get immediate and indefinite work eligibility. They do have to repay a travel loan. They get help with travel here, but they have to repay that. Refugees from Ukraine and Venezuela come as humanitarian parolees. They have work eligibility, but they don't have a pathway to citizenship. They need a sponsor to provide, kind of say that you will make sure their needs are taken care of, or they're put in a situation they can take care of their own needs, which is the best, and they need travel authorization. And I don't know how many of you heard of the Afghan Adjustment Act. That is still floating around in Congress. And if that goes through, that for the Afghans does provide a pathway to citizenship. So I know our organization, both of the organizations are very supportive of that. Afghan evacuees come with humanitarian parole but do not need a U.S. sponsor. They're receiving services through the resettlement agencies. And this is a screenshot from a video that I guess was on a news feed on Ukraine, right? Showing someone leaving their home here in 2022 with a donkey cart. Don't press it too hard. Okay, so the ongoing activities of the Refugee Alliance. In 2017, we had the only family that we've been able to welcome that came through the UN program. That family was from South Sudan, and a family of 3, and then another child was born more recently. 2018, a woman originally from South Sudan came with 4 children, and we continue to work with her. We do work with former refugees because it takes a long time to settle, particularly if you're coming from a country that is very different from ours. And this is Adar, and you will hear her story in just a minute here. And we expanded to former refugees. I think that was about 2018. And we presently have 13 to 14 South Sudanese families that we're working with here in Ames. And then in 2022, it was about June, I think, we embraced serving the Ukrainian humanitarian parolees. And we presently have 26 parolees in 10 families. And we have about 5 more coming in January or February. And we're looking for host families and sponsors. The need is tremendous. The things that we provide, well, none of them should surprise you. The most recent addition is assistance with documents. The humanitarian parolees have a lot of paperwork that they have to go through. And Yevin's looking at me, and he's not done yet. And then here's the first story.
My mom left with 4 kids. She have 8, but other 4, 2 of them, they were gone to Red Army. They were boys, and they got took away at the age of 6 and 8 years old because we ran out of men for war, so they come and take the kids to prepare them to go fight. And then my mother, the war came and hit the place called Turale. And she took us, like I said, 4 of us, my older sister, my brother, and me. At the time I was 2, I believe. My sister, she was 3 months old, and we were walking weeks and weeks and weeks, so 3 to 4 weeks before hit the border, which is the place is called Abyei. And so the condition was really, really bad. I remember that my mother had 1 can of peanut butter. Every night we have to take 1 spoon for dinner to make sure that peanut butter lasts us 3 weeks or the 4 weeks that we have to walk. People with kids, they leave them behind because kids cry and make noise. And then the army, when they hear kids crying, they know that's how people walking. So they start shooting at people. So what they do, if your kids are younger, they don't want you to walk with them. It was about 200 people traveling from South Sudan. We were going to North Sudan. Hundred of people die on the way. Some of them got shot, some of them died of sickness and hungry, rain, cold, and it was really bad weather. So my mother would leave me under the tree with my sister and say like, you two stay here, be quiet, no noise, nothing like that, till she come back to come and get us. In Khartoum, the condition was really, really bad. When we made it, well, none of us speak Arabic, of course. Just at once, people was just coming out of nowhere and arrived to Khartoum, place is called Bahari. I was hungry. My stomach was really hurt, and then the hurt was gone, so I don't feel anything anymore. So when I stopped complaining, my mother knew that I'm dying. We eat dirt, and we eat sand, like there was some soft sand. You have to eat it, and it tastes different, and you drink water after that. So you pretend that it's food till we survive. So that's why it was a condition. I think for 3 years or 2 years. I remember when I turned 5, that's when I started my first job as a babysitter. Some of us are still affected by that until now. Mental or to be able to settle in the United States is not easy. Trust is not easy, and a different culture, and we are trying to get along with it to learn how to survive. And thank God that we came here to this country to have the second chance to become a better. So I came with the arranged married. I was married at age of 14. I was engaged at 13, got married at 14. My age has changed. In order for me to leave from Khartoum to Egypt, I have to be old enough, and I have to be old enough in American law to be someone's wife.
Yeah.
So that's how I came. I went to Egypt in like the real age of 15 years old, but I was already 22 years old in my document age, yes.
Yeah.
I was in Egypt for 2 years, doing my process with my ex-husband now, doing the married visa. And I was about to go to UN and to tell you on my story. I don't want that married because I don't know him. I never met him before. But they're threatening me if I go there, it's going to be a problem. And also because they pay dowry. At the beginning of 2003 when I came to US, I thought I was going to go to school. Consider myself very lucky. And then when I came here, instead of me going to school, he put me to work. So I've been working and having a baby and working and having a baby and working and having a baby. Yeah. And for 10 and a half years until I said enough is enough. And I was going through mental abuse and some physical abuse. I left, so I kept lying to him and I said, yes, I'll be there and I'll be there, and I never. And when he left, gone to work, I still have a house key. I went back and stole my document because he hid my document from me. He took everything from me, so in order for me not to have any access to anything, so I stole my documents, my social security and birth certificate for my kids. There's a lot of movies in Lifetime, and it's still now. Like sometimes when I think that I'm weak and I look back and I see those shows and I see those women did and change their life, they went to school, they do this, and I said I can do it too. I never thought that one day someone will ask me to sit down and tell my story.
And now we have a personal story. Yevon Shirshenko arrived in Iowa in July 27th. So Yevon?
Hello, my name is Yevon, and I am from Ukraine. We, with my family, came to US this summer. First war in Ukraine started in 2014. It's since Russia took Crimea. And since that times, our region was under Russia. The life quality dropped down, and our city became not the safest place, and our life changed. We thought that war ends in days, maybe weeks, but it continues years. We use it to that life, we use it to life under Russia, and we use it to life in war. But our life changed again in February 2022. Our region became a war field. Schools are closed. We lost good Medicaid because a lot of doctors move to more safest place around the world. And we lose all benefits of a big city. Russia started took men from work and streets to army to fight against Ukraine. We cannot believe what in 21st century we can lose our freedom. Our region bombing every day, and that was the last point, and we decided to move to safest place. From other Ukrainians, I found about road to US through Mexico, but then in days I found out about United for Ukraine program, and I applied to 10 or maybe more different forms and organizations to find sponsor, and got answer only from one. All paperwork took maybe 3 weeks, and when the papers were ready, we started to move. Because our region became a war field, all borders were closed, and the only one way was opened. It was way through Russia. My wife and kids started first. And then in few days I made attempt to cross Russian border, but they didn't pass me. On the next day I successfully passed border. I spent night in a Russian hotel. I bought a flight ticket to Turkey and drove to the closest city with a working airport because a lot of airports in Russia closed during the war. We flew separately from Russia to Turkey as tourists, and we flew with minimum luggage. When we got to Turkey, it's safe country for us. When I got to Turkey, I bought tickets to US. We spent few days before flight and get to US. And I want to thank all people who help us get to US, who gave us home, who help us got a job, and who became for us friends. And I have video. The video, it's not movie. It's a video from my own city, and. Yeah. And I have a lot of different videos and photos. We can spend few days watching it. Thank you.
He deserves it, yes. This was actually the calmest of the videos that he sent me. He had said that it was from a friend's apartment, so I thought you could relate to it, but yeah, many of the other videos were quite Quite dramatic. So, most important, we need more people to work with us on this. You can join ASIP with helping with asylum seekers and undocumented immigrants, or join ERA in settling refugees. Both of the organizations, we need sponsors, we need hosts, we need assistance in providing housing, household goods, transportation, assistance with English classes, or a conversation partner. You don't have to teach English, you can just be there to talk. Child care while a parent works or studies, accompanying to health, legal, or school appointments. There's also an ASIP DACA committee that is seeking volunteers, or you can advocate, all from your home. You can advocate for asylum seekers by reaching out to your legislatures to try to push for right type of legislation to improve the conditions, talking to your neighbors, co-workers. All of these things are important for advocating at the federal level. A lot of the work we talk about up here is advocating here, locally. I keep getting advocating locally. That pointer doesn't work. And also I wanted to comment on a new kid in town, the Story County Immigrant and Refugee Collaboration. This is linking up a number of the organizations in Ames that are seeking to improve conditions for refugees and immigrants. And this actually developed out of the COVID-19 Immigrant Fund, Emergency Immigrant Fund for Story County. As that closed down, this group got going. So another important group that is kind of looking at overseeing what's going on in general. So now I want to thank you. I want to thank the immigrants and refugees who shared their stories, especially Yevon, who had the wherewithal to come out here and speak before you. The volunteers with ASIP and ERA, and many service providers. There are lists on the table here. The League of Women Voters for sponsoring this, setting this, organizing this talk. Ames Public Library for hosting us. And then David Hanson, particularly for those of you who are online, this is your chance to contact with the organizations. David is the chair of ASIP. Susan Kramer is the incoming chair of ERA. I will complete my term the end of the month here. And I'm so thrilled that we have Susan. Is Susan here? Yes, Susan, our new incoming chair as of January. I'm so thrilled. You know, when you launch an organization and you work on it for so long, it's so nice to know it's going to have continuity when someone else will step forward to lead it. So thank you, Susan. And then also I put my email down there. There is a sign-up table at the back. Bev can sign you up, and I think we're ready for questions.
We just ask that you speak into the microphone if you have a question so that it transmits to the video. So I will run mics if anyone has one.
Questions, anyone? There we go.
Diane, you mentioned why Lisa Duck came from the southern border. What are some other reasons that there are immigrants who really want to come to the United States, but they make that long, dangerous trek and then they're turned back, and they know they'll be turned back? What are some of the other reasons?
I think it's best if we switch to the other end of that row. Bruce Hansen, who spent time in Honduras,
Yes.
I think has...
Hi, my name is Bruce Hansen. We were missionaries in Honduras. We lived 8 miles from the Guatemalan border, and we would meet some of the people who were coming back who had tried to immigrate and got returned at the U.S.-Mexican border. And they would be put on buses for 23 hours, and they were only given water unless they had food or money of their own to buy food. So we would we would greet them when they came back to the Guatemalan-Honduran border and give them food and supplies and other things. But as far as why these people are leaving Honduras, I mean, there was like 400 to 500 people every night would be coming back on these buses. And a lot of them were, you know, a young couple with a couple of little kids. And mostly it's just economics. There also was 2 hurricanes in 2020, a Category 4 and Category 5 hurricane that hit the northern coast of Honduras. COVID-19 wiped out a lot of the jobs, then also the huge gang problems that they have down there. There's a lot of extortion, and my wife talked to one woman who, her husband had been in a gang, and the gang, after he'd been working them for a while, the gang said, now you need to kill somebody from the other gang, and he didn't want to do this, so he immigrated to the U.S., and the next day the gang came to the house and talked to his wife, and they said, you're going to join the gang now, and she said, no, I don't want to do that. So they raped her that night, and they said, if you don't join the gang, we'll be back tomorrow to visit you and your daughters. So it was pretty rough there. There's a little side note. My wife and I have started a project called Project Healthy Children to help children in the community where we lived, called Rio Chiquito. It's a program to provide meals 3 times a week and education, and also like computer training and other things like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce.
You mentioned these detention centers, or you called them prisons, on the southern border. How many of those are being run by for-profit companies?
I don't know the answer to that, but I would be very suspicious. I don't know. The Floras are here. Is that something you followed at all? More than half. Yeah. Thank you. This is great. I have other people who just answer the questions. You have to know your audience, right? Other questions? Yes.
Well, thank you for coming. Yevhen, is that the way you say your name? What's your outlook for the next, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah, I cannot answer that question now because we are in US like 4 months, and I just started work. Of course, we want to build a new life, new safe life, and we'll see what happens next.
I think it's noteworthy that Yevhen lived under Russian occupation, essentially, since 2014. Both of his children were born under Russian occupation. And then I tried to point out where the town was. I hope that made sense too, in the far eastern part of Ukraine. Other questions? Yes.
Maybe another question for Yevhen. When you lived in the city over there, I've been reading different reports that, the Russians are trying to use propaganda to and there's kind of a lot of unrest between the Russian and the Ukrainian side and stuff. And your English is so good. Did you know English when you lived over there? And was there like internet freedom where you could like go to YouTube or see videos or understand US? And then maybe a follow-up question is, did that kind of lead to your desire or interest in coming to the United States or finding a path to get to the United States?
So yeah, we had freedom like internet since that year. They started restrictions like maybe in June. They blocked some websites like Facebook, Instagram, maybe others. I don't know about others, only about popular. We can access to news, to world news, but we haven't. I don't know how that in English, news which against government. And yeah, we learned English in school. Of course, we cannot learn. People, so kids in my region cannot learn Ukrainian now because they took it off from schools. Only Russian language.
This is just a comment from my own perspective. I know that people get to the United States through all paths, some of them legal, some of them illegal, some of them quasi-legal. But for me, when they get here, I like to refer to people who have come here, regardless of how they got here, as being newly arrived Americans. And I just like to leave it at that, newly arrived Americans. And I also, this term, humanitarian parolees, somehow I object to the word parolees. I mean, because, yeah, to me, it's like you did something wrong, and now we're going to give you a chance, and you're on parole. But that's just my sentiment. So thank you for being here.
I very much agree with that. The problem is, you know, these are the legal terms that the government uses for these categories of how people are coming. So particularly, you know, we consider the humanitarian parolees refugees. They, as far as escaping war, escaping violence, you know, they fit the refugee definition. But I think it is important to recognize the pathways they come to. And it's very complicated. And I had meant to comment, but I think a lot of these pathways, humanitarian parolee, temporary protective status, that's another one that has certain uses. And I think that there are workarounds because our refugee system is broken. And what the Joanne Bartine told me when I asked her, you know, what is wrong? Why are we not processing refugees? You know, the quota went up, but why are they not being processed? And she said, well, all of the agents have gone to work with the asylum seekers or the Afghan. And they just don't have people to process the refugee categories. So that people can't get in that way. So then humanitarian parole, temporary protective status, and then they need follow-up legislation to give people citizenship, to make it so they can become fully Americans. But thank you for your comment. And yeah, I had a hard time with that term, humanitarian parolee. Maybe since English is not your first language, it's okay.
I don't know. I don't know what that word means for us.
Hold that.
Yeah, I don't know if it works or not. For us, parole means like passport. So I don't know what that word means in English.
Yeah. So I guess it's most important that it doesn't bother Yevon and his family. I think they're happy to be here. Yeah. Yeah. Any further questions? Or do people really want to go back out into the ice and cold out there? So Yevon, what do you think about an Iowa winter here?
Yeah, weather in Iowa very similar with Ukraine, so we like it home.
Very good. Very good. Well, we'll be happy to take one-on-one questions if you'd like. I will probably pull on my face mask as I get closer to more people, but be happy to answer other questions. Thank you. And thank you.